They sold the blind girl for $2 until the silent cowboy took her hand and said, the year was 1871, and the Wyoming frontier lay raw and wide as a wound still healing from the war. Dust moved like breath across the empty plains, curling around wagon ruts and wind-bent grass, whispering the kind of secrets only the lonely ever stop to hear. Folks like to believe the frontier brought opportunity, but those who lived long enough knew the truth. It brought hunger, loss, and the kind of choices that clawed a soul bare. And that morning, as the town of Red Hollow stirred awake beneath a dim, ghost-colored sky, a blind girl stood on the trading post's porch, waiting to hear what her life would be sold for. Lydia Grace didn't need sight to know the men circling were mean. She could tell by the sound of their boots, heavy, careless, impatient, men who expected the world to step aside for them. She listened to the timbre of their laughter, the scrape of chairs dragged across rough plank floors, the clink of whiskey bottles knocking against each other as hands reached for another drink. Every sound sharpened her understanding more than sight ever could. She stood with her hands clasped, fingers trembling just enough for her to tuck them behind her skirt. The morning wind tasted of smoke, old rain, and sourness of spilled liquor, signs of a place that did mercy poorly. She didn't know the name of the man who brought her here. Her mother's cousin, she thought, but even that felt like too generous a word. He'd shown up without warning 2 days ago, smelling of sweat and mule leather, saying her stay with the widow in Cheyenne had grown too expensive. Can't afford a mouth that don't see, he'd muttered, dragging her toward his wagon before she could find her boots. She had cried out, asking where they were going, but he'd barked that she'd learn soon enough. The wagon wheels had grown the whole long ride, bouncing her over stones and ruts, jerking her spine until she could barely sit upright. When they finally arrived at Red Hollow, he'd hauled her from the wagon with a grunt of relief, like she weighed more than he'd bargained for. Now she stood barefoot on the porch, the wood warm beneath her toes, the sound of the crowd thickening. She sensed more men arriving, heels crunching dirt, rusted spurs jingling, low voices muttering guesses about her age, her worth, her blindness. One man spat, the wet splat landing inches from her foot. She flinched but didn't move. Moving drew attention. She'd learned that lesson early. Inside the trading post, her captor barked at the storekeeper for a drink, slamming something metallic onto the counter. A cup rattled. A bottle glugged. Lydia listened closely. Coins? A knife? No, too heavy. A pistol, perhaps. Her breath thinned with dread. She didn't know how this would end, but she was certain it wouldn't end gently. Her name was called. The girl stiffened, stepping toward the sound, her captor's hand clamped around her wrist, thick, bruising fingers pressing too hard. She gasped but didn't fight. Fighting made things worse. Always, he shoved her forward until she felt open air. The voices quieted. A curious hush rolled over the crowd. Even without eyes, she felt them staring at her, evaluating, measuring, deciding. She swallowed hard, lifting her chin, forcing her voice small but steady. "What is happening?" she whispered. Her captor squeezed her wrist again. "You're being useful," he growled. Finally, a hot jolt of fear shot through her, climbing her spine. She tried to tug her hand free, but he jerked her closer, forcing her still. She could smell the cheap whiskey on his breath, feel the cruel way his fingers dug into her skin. She trembled, and the crowd noticed. "Ah, she's scared," someone drawled. "Blind, too. Useless," another man muttered. "Not useless," a third voice said. "Pretty enough. Someone want her." Laughter rippled. Lydia's stomach twisted, and she felt her knees soften beneath her, but she forced herself upright. Showing fear was another mistake she'd learned to hide. A boot step tapped forward. Lydia angled her head toward the sound. Whoever was moved lightly, careful as a snake. His voice came smooth and slow, dripping with a smile she didn't need eyes to detect. "What's the price?" Her captor answered with false pride. $2. The crowd erupted. "2," someone scoffed. "She ain't worth half that. Blind, small, and shaking. Might not even make it through winter." Lydia clenched her jaw, refusing to shrink. She couldn't change being blind, but she wouldn't let them erase the rest of her. A coin flipped in the air, landing on the wood with a sharp metallic ring. Then another followed. 2 coins. $2. Paid without hesitation. Her captor's grip loosened. Just a moment. Just enough for Lydia to feel a shift in the air. The man who had tossed the coin stepped closer. She felt him before he touched her. He moved differently from the rest. Silent, steady, like someone who'd learned to place his feet with precision. A faint smell of cedar smoke and saddle oil brushed her senses. Then a hand, large, warm, steady, landed gently on her shoulder. Lydia froze, not out of fear, out of shock. No one had touched her gently in years. A deep voice said 3 words, as though the speaker wasn't used to speaking them. "You're safe now." The murmurs around them fell silent. Her breath caught. Safe was a word she hadn't heard in years. Safe was a word she stopped believing in. She couldn't help the whisper that slipped past her lips. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. He simply guided her off the porch, his hand still at her shoulder, protective but not forceful. His movements radiated something she couldn't name, a quiet strength, a patience born from pain, a steadiness she instinctively leaned toward. But her captor lunged. "Now, wait, just He never finished. A single motion cut through the air. Lydia heard it, a soft glide of metal, the click of a hammer drawn back. The crowd gasped, which scraped as boots scrambled away. The new man hadn't lifted his gun. Not fully, just enough to send a message. Her captor snarled, "She ain't yours." "I didn't say sold." "You took the money, Bert," someone said. "We all saw it." "That don't matter. She's—" Another click, louder this time, more deliberate. The crowd backed away entirely now, clearing a wide circle around Lydia and the stranger. She couldn't see him, but she felt every shift in the atmosphere. He was calm, very calm, too calm for a man facing a fight. Her captor, on the other hand, shook with rage and fear. "Put the gun down," someone hollered. "Or shoot him and be done," another cackled. Lydia felt the stranger's hand settle more firmly on her shoulder, not possessive, but reassuring, protective, a warning to anyone thinking to take her. Her captor barked a curse and charged. Lydia flinched, bracing for impact. It never came. A single, dull thud echoed, the sound of fists connecting with bone. Her captor howled. Another thud followed, then a crash as he toppled to the ground. The crowd roared with approval, boots stomping, laughter bursting. When silence settled again, the stranger's hand returned to her shoulder as though nothing had happened. He guided her away, step by step, each movement careful, measured. Lydia focused on the rhythm of his gait. Slow, even, purposeful. No hesitation. Whoever he was, he'd done this sort of thing before. Many times. They moved past the trading post, down the street where the wind carried fewer voices, and the ground felt less trampled. Lydia breathed easier, though her pulse still beat hard against her ribs. Finally, when the sounds of the crowd dimmed behind them, she gathered the courage to speak. "Why did you help me?" The stranger didn't answer. His silence wasn't cruel or dismissive, just practiced, like a man who'd spent years with more thoughts than words. They walked until Lydia sensed they were nearly clear of town. The earth beneath her feet shifted from packed dirt to looser soil, and she heard the distant snort of a horse tied to a post. He stopped. Lydia waited. After several moments, he spoke, his voice low, raw around the edges. "Name's Elias." Elias. She repeated it in her mind, tasting the weight of it. Strong. Quiet. Like him. He placed her hand on the horse's flank, letting her feel the warmth of the animal. She traced its muscles, marveling at its power, feeling something steadying in the way it breathed. Behind them, faint but unmistakable, Lydia heard footsteps. 2 sets. Slow, purposeful, watching. She stiffened. Elias felt it. He turned slightly, the shift in his body unmistakable. A protective stance, placing himself between her and the danger. "Elias," she whispered, breath trembling. "Someone's following." "I know." His voice had changed, harder now already. The footsteps paused. A dry wind swept through the street, rattling a loose shutter against the wall. Lydia gripped Elias's coat, heart hammering. "Are we in danger?" she whispered. Elias then turned toward her. He didn't move at all, but she felt the tension coiled through him like a drawn bow. "Yes." The footsteps resumed, just two men, but their intent weighed heavy in the air. Lydia didn't need sight to sense danger. Her hearing told her everything. The deliberate pace, the heavy breathing, the slight metallic rattle of guns resting loose in their holsters. Elias shifted again, barely, but enough to tell her he was ready to fight. The men stopped a few yards behind them. "Nice girl you got there," one of them drawled. Elias didn't respond. "Might be someone looking for her," the second sneered. Still, Elias stayed silent. Their boots scraped the dirt as they stepped closer. Lydia's voice quivered. "Elias..." He rested a reassuring hand on her arm, and then the first man spat on the ground. "Reckon we'll be seeing you real soon, Cowboy." Their footsteps retreated. Not far, just enough to let the message hang thick in the air. Elias exhaled slowly, guiding Lydia onto the horse. She swallowed, voice thin. "Who were they?" "Trouble," Elias said. "The kind that doesn't let go." He helped her settle, his hands careful, steadying her with surprising gentleness. She felt his palm linger just long enough for her to sense something else beneath his silence, a burden he carried, heavy as a winter sky. When he mounted behind her, the horse shifted, and Lydia felt his arm wrap around her waist to keep her steady. His touch was firm but respectful, protective without claiming. For the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid of being touched. As they rode out of Red Hollow, the wind whipped past them, carrying the murmur of the watching men like a warning stitched into the air. Lydia lifted her chin, listening to the rhythm of the horse's hooves, the creak of saddle leather, the steady, unspoken promise in Elias's breath near her ear. She did not know where they were going. Elias did not tell her what danger shadowed them, but she felt, deep in her bones, that the moment those $2 hit the wooden porch, her life had changed forever. And somewhere behind them, in the dying light of day, the two men who'd watched them leave turned toward one another with grim smiles, because trouble wasn't following Elias Ward and the blind girl. It was hunting them. The prairies stretched wide in gold beneath the rising sun as Elias guided the horse toward a narrow trail carved between distant hills. The wind carried the smell of sagebrush and dry earth, brushing Lydia's face like a whisper of a world she could only imagine. She leaned slightly forward in the saddle, listening to every sound, the creak of leather, the rhythmic snore of the horse, and the steady, controlled breathing of the man behind her. Elias didn't waste breath on words, but his silence wasn't empty. It felt protective, thoughtful, the kind of quiet shaped by years of watching the world from the edges. She clung to that quiet like a lifeline. They rode for hours, leaving Red Hollow far behind. Yet Lydia couldn't shake the uneasy chill that crept through her whenever she remembered the voices of the two men who'd followed them. Even without eyes, she felt their intent. They weren't finished, not by a long shot. Elias knew it too. She sensed in the way his body stayed tense, in the way he scanned every rustle of grass and flutter of wind. Finally, when the sun had climbed high enough to warm her cheeks, he slowed the horse beside a small stream. Lydia heard the gentle rush of water over stone, the soft chirping of hidden birds. Elias dismounted first, then helped her down, his grip steady on her waist. She touched the ground carefully, feeling the cool grass brush her ankles. She breathed deeply, savoring the fresh scent that replaced the staleness of the trading post. Elias led her to a fallen log near the stream. She sat while he tended the horse, removing its saddle with quiet efficiency. Metal buckles clinked softly. Leather thudded. Then came a splash. He was letting the horse drink. Lydia clasped her hands in her lap. "Where are we going?" Elias didn't answer immediately. Water splashed. A bird shrieked overhead. Finally he spoke, voice low and weighted. "North. Is that where you live?" He hesitated. "For now." She tilted her head slightly, trying to catch the unspoken meaning. For now, as though he'd never stayed anywhere long enough to call a home. "And you're taking me there?" "Safer than anywhere else." His tone said he believed it, yet she heard something beneath it, a flicker of doubt. "Safer from those two men?" she asked softly. He didn't respond. The silence told her enough. She pressed again, timid but needing the truth. Why did they follow us? Elias moved to sit beside her on the log. He didn't touch her, but she could feel his presence like a warm shield. Your captor owed money, he finally said. Those men wanted payment. You were the payment. Her stomach tightened. But you paid, and you? I paid him, Elias said, voice steady. Not them. So they think you owe them. They don't think, Elias said. They know. Lydia lowered her head. For a moment, the memory of her captor's grip, the crowd's laughter, and the sound of coins hitting what swarmed around her like a storm she couldn't outrun. She folded her hands tighter. I don't want to be a burden. Elias inhaled sharply, not in irritation, but in something like surprise. You're not. You don't even know me. I know enough. She turned slightly toward him, curious. What do you know? That you've suffered, he said, and you still stand. Lydia felt her breath hitch. Those were the gentlest words she'd heard in years. She swallowed, unsure how to receive them. She wanted to ask more, wanted to understand him better, but Elias pushed himself to his feet before she could speak again. We'll eat, he said. She nodded, listening as he rummaged through his saddlebag. Soon the scent of cured meat and dry bread reached her. He placed a portion in her hands, guiding her fingers so she wouldn't drop it. She murmured a thank you and ate quietly beside him. The food was simple, but it filled her, easing the tightness in her stomach. After they finished, Elias stood again, this time scanning the horizon. Lydia could tell from the shift in his posture that something had caught his attention. She pressed her palms to the rough log, heart quickening. Is someone there? Not yet, he said, but the strain in his voice betrayed him. What do you mean? Elias exhaled slowly. Tracks on the trail. Fresh. Could be them. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her. Are they close? Close enough that we keep moving. He reached for her hand, not abruptly, but with quiet assurance. Come on. His fingers wrapped around hers, warm and firm, guiding her back to the horse. She felt the panic rising inside her, sharp and cold, but Elias's steady grip grounded her. He lifted her into the saddle again, settled her hands on the horn, then swung up behind her. As he nudged the horse into motion, she felt his arm encircle her waist once more. They rode faster this time, the wind whipping her hair, the sounds of prairie rushing past. Lydia focused on Elias's breathing, slow, even controlled, but beneath that control lay something deeper, fear. Not for himself. For her. Hours passed. The sun drifted lower. Shadows lengthened across the land like dark fingers reaching for them. Elias slowed only when the ground grew rockier, forcing the horse to tread carefully. Lydia felt the shift in terrain, the uneven earth humming beneath her feet. Where are we now? She asked. Hawthorne Ridge, he said, close to my cabin. A cabin. She imagined a quiet place tucked against the hills, warm and sheltered, far from the prying eyes of dangerous men. The thought calmed her racing heart. As they climbed higher, the air grew cooler. Lydia heard the crunch of gravel beneath the horse's hooves, then the soft rush of wind sweeping through pine. The scent of sap and resin filled her senses, grounding her more than sight ever could. Elias guided the horse through a narrow passage, and finally, as they crested a small hill, he slowed. We're here, he murmured. He dismounted first, then helped her down. Lydia felt the earth beneath her boots. Firm, cool, covered in scattered pine needles. She reached out instinctively, searching for something to orient herself. Elias placed her hand on the rough edge of a wooden porch railing. This is your home? She asked. For now, he repeated. He led her inside. The cabin smelled of cedar, old smoke, and something faintly metallic. A gun cleaned often, she guessed. The floorboards creaked softly beneath their feet. Lydia listened as Elias closed the door behind them. For the first time since Red Hollow, she felt walls around her, a roof above her, a sense of space she could breathe in. Elias guided her to a chair near a small table. Sit, he said. She did, folding her hands in her lap. Thank you, she offered quietly, for everything. Elias didn't answer right away. She heard him moving around the room, checking shutters, securing bolts, placing something heavy on a shelf. His steps were precise, intentional. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. "You don't need to thank me." Lydia tilted her head. Most men wouldn't have helped. Elias stopped moving. She sensed him near her, though he didn't touch her. "Most men ain't me." She smiled faintly, though a question tugged at her mind. Why him? Why her? What had made him step forward when everyone else stepped back? Before she could ask, a sudden crack echoed outside, a branch snapping. Elias was at the window in an instant. Lydia's heart leapt into her throat. She grasped the armrest of the chair, waiting for his verdict. The silence stretched long enough to twist her stomach. "Elias," she whispered. He returned to her, his steps quick, urgent. "Pack your things," he said. Her breath hitched. "Why? Are they?" "2 men. Down the ridge." Lydia stood, hands trembling. "They followed us all this way?" "Men like that don't quit." He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back of the cabin. I don't have things to pack," she stammered. "Doesn't matter. We need to go." He stopped at a small door. She heard him lift a latch. Cold air swept inside, biting her cheeks. He was leading her out the back, away from the approaching danger. A gunshot cracked through the air. Lydia yelped and ducked instinctively, clutching Elias's coat. Elias pushed her behind him, shielding her with his body. The gunshot hadn't come from far. Maybe 100 yards. Maybe less. "Move," Elias whispered. They ran. Branches whipped her arms and skirts as they crashed into the trees. The ground sloped downward, forcing her to stumble. But Elias kept her upright, his hand gripping hers with fierce determination. Another gunshot rang out, then another, echoing to the ridge like thunder. "Are they shooting at us?" she cried. "Trying to scare us," Elias said. "For now. What happens when they stop trying and start aiming?" Elias didn't answer. They reached a cluster of boulders. Elias pulled her behind the largest one, pressing her back against the cold stone. She heard him checking his revolver, metal clicking softly. "How many bullets do you have?" she whispered. "Enough." She doubted it. Men like the ones chasing them wouldn't come with empty pockets. They would have guns, knives, whiskey, and no sense of restraint. The kind of men who'd sell anyone, blind or not, if it meant settling a debt. Lydia touched Elias's arm. "Why risk yourself for me? You could have left me in Red Hollow." "For what?" he asked, voice sharp. "To be bought again? Hurt? Used? Why do you care?" She heard the faintest hitch in his breathing. "Because once," he said slowly, "I stood by and did nothing. Someone paid for it with their life." She froze, not because the words frightened her, but because she felt the raw truth behind them. Elias wasn't running from danger. He was running from guilt. Footsteps crunched nearby. Lydia tensed. Elias's hand tightened around her wrist. She could sense how close the men were. 20 yards, maybe less. She could hear their heavy breathing, their low voices. "Tracks go this way." "They ain't far." Elias shifted, preparing to fight. "No," Lydia whispered, gripping his arm. "Don't. Please. They'll kill you. They'll kill you first." She swallowed a sob. "Then run. Leave me. I don't want your blood on my hands." Elias turned toward her, close enough that she felt the warmth of his breath. "I don't leave people," he said quietly. "Not anymore." The footsteps grew louder. Elias moved in front of her, shielding her completely. "Stay behind me," he whispered. Lydia pressed against a rock, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The men stepped into view. Elias stood tall, gun drawn. "You boys lost," he called out, his voice steady, controlled. The taller man sneered. "We come for the girl, not yours to take." "Hell, she ain't. She's worth more than you paid." Elias cocked his revolver. "You'll have to kill me first." "That can be arranged." A gun lifted. Lydia heard the metal click. Then a roar of thunder, a scream, boots scrambling, a second gunshot, a grunt of pain. Silence. Lydia pressed her palms to her ears, breath shaking. "Elias." Heavy breathing. Footsteps approaching. But only one set. Then Elias's hand touched her shoulder. "It's over." She collapsed against him, trembling so violently she couldn't speak. Elias steadied her, holding her just tightly enough to keep her from falling apart. The danger had passed, but only for now. And as Elias guided her deeper into the forest, away from the ridge and away from the bodies cooling behind them, Lydia sensed that section 2 of her journey wasn't the end of their danger. It was only the beginning. The storm had rolled past by dawn, leaving the world smelling of wet dust and charred cedar, but the peace it left behind was thin as a whisper. Cal stood at the mouth of the ravine, hat low, shoulders rigid, listening to the wind scrape over the rocks. Beside him, Lily clung to his arm, her sightless eyes facing the pale sky as though she could feel every shift of light. She said nothing. She rarely did when danger hovered close. Something in her seemed to sense it more keenly than any man with perfect vision ever could. Behind them, the mule shifted nervously, hooves tapping against stone. The canyon funneled sound strangely, and each echo seemed like a footstep out of place. Cal's hand drifted to the worn grip of his coat. He didn't draw it, not yet, but the weight of it steadied him. "They're close, aren't they?" Lily asked softly. "Closer than they ought to be," he answered. The night before, after fleeing the trading post and crossing half a mountain by moonlight, Cal had hoped the men who bought her for $2 would give up the chase. But greed made men persistent, and cruelty made them inventive. The brothers, Hale and Judd Corbin, were both. They had tracked Cal once before, over a debt he refused to let an old ranch widow pay on his behalf. He knew their ways. He knew they relished the hunt. He also knew they would kill Lily if they caught her. Cal guided her deeper into the ravine, boots scraping over gravel. The walls rose high and jagged around them, closing out the sky until only a narrow ribbon of blue remained. Lily reached her hand toward it as though measuring its warmth. "What do you see?" Cal asked. "Nothing," she whispered, "but I can hear the day waking up. The birds are quiet, too quiet." He nodded. She was right. Even the ravens had hushed. They moved on, pushing toward the ravine's far exit. Cal planned to lead them to the river crossing before noon, then follow the water until they reached the abandoned mining town he remembered from years back. If luck favored them, he could hide her there until he dealt with the Corbin for good. But luck had never stayed with him long, and the morning air carried the metallic scent of a fight brewing. "Cal," Lily said, gripping his sleeve. "Stop." He halted instantly. "What is it?" She tilted her head, listening. Then, 3 men behind us, maybe 4, one scraping metal on rock. Cal's heartbeat thudded. "How far?" "Close enough." He didn't waste another second. "We have to move." They broke into a run, though Lily's stride was shorter, careful. Cal kept her steady, guiding her with his hand on her back as they hurried toward the narrowing path ahead. The walls pressed tighter, shadows pooling in every crevice. Behind them came the echo of boots, slow, deliberate, mocking. Hale Corbin's voice boomed through the canyon. "Cal Walker, you ain't got nowhere left to go." Lily stiffened, fear rippling through her body. Cal squeezed her hand. "Don't listen." But Hale's voice carried like wildfire. "Bring us the girl, and maybe we'll let you limp out alive." Cal nearly laughed. Humorless feral. He kept moving. The ravine forked up ahead, left leading to an open ledge overlooking a deadly drop, right diving into a shadowed crevice barely wide enough for 2. Cal steered Lily right. They squeezed through, scraping shoulders on jagged stone. For a moment the world went dark and tight, but then it opened into a narrow shelf edging along the canyon wall. "Careful," Cal murmured. Lily nodded, trusting him completely. Each step was a prayer. Below them, the canyon floor yawned 20 feet down, strewn with broken rock and thorn brush. A fall wouldn't kill them immediately, but it would slow them enough for the Corbins to finish the job. Boot steps echoed again, closer now. The brothers had followed the left fork, thinking Cal had gone that way. The moment they realized their mistake, they'd double back. Minutes, maybe less. Cal and Lily hurried along the ledge until the stone widened into a sunlit pocket overlooking the valley. Finally, a breath of open air. But Cal stopped short. Not 30 yards ahead, blocking the path entirely, stood Judd Corbin. He leaned against the rock wall, rifle resting lazily in his hands, grin curving under his scruffy beard. "Mornin', Cal," he drawled. "Thought you'd give us more of a run." "Shame." Cal stepped in front of Lily. "You touch her," he said quietly, "and I'll make sure you don't breathe another sunrise." Judd chuckled. "Boy, I bought her fair. She's mine." Cal's jaw tightened, fury burning hot. "She's a human being. She's property." Judd shot back. "And you stole her." Before Cal could retort, Hale and the fourth man rounded the corner behind them. Trapped. The brothers had planned this well. Lily took a step back, trembling. "Cal, I'm here," he said. "Stay behind me." Judd lifted the rifle. "Now hand her over. Ain't no reason for you to die today unless you insist." Cal glanced at the drop beside them. If he jumped with her, maybe the brush would soften the landing enough. Risky, maybe fatal, but better than letting her fall into the hands of men who saw her as nothing but a purchase. He waited. The breeze shifted, tugging at Lily's hair. Then Cal whispered, "When I move, you drop." "What?" "Just trust me." Before she could answer, he lunged. The shot rang out instantly, ricocheting off the stone behind him. Cal barreled into Judd, driving him into the wall. The rifle clattered to the ground. Hale shouted, running forward. Lily dropped to her knees just as Cal told her, making herself small, protecting her head. Judd threw a punch that cracked against Cal's jaw. Cal answered with an elbow to the man's ribs. Hearing something snap, Judd howled, but Hale was nearly on them, gun raised. Cal grabbed Judd by the shirt and spun him around, just as Hale fired. The bullet slammed into Judd's shoulder. He screamed again, collapsing. "You idiot!" Hale roared. Cal shoved the wounded man toward the edge. Judd flailed, trying to grab onto something, but his boot slipped. His scream echoed down the canyon as he vanished over the side. Hale's face twisted with rage. "You'll die for that." Cal didn't doubt it. The fourth man lunged for Lily. She scrambled back, hands searching the ground. Cal ripped Hale's gun arm aside as he fired again. The shot sparked off the ledge inches from Lily's knee. Cal drove his fist into Hale's gut, then slammed his knee upward. The older Corbin stumbled, but didn't fall. He reached for his knife. The fourth man managed to grab Lily's wrist. She kicked wildly, hitting his shin. He yanked her toward him. "No!" Cal bellowed. He hurled Hale aside and tackled the man, holding Lily. They tumbled dangerously close to the ledge. Dust burst around them. The man swung his elbow into Cal's cheek, rattling teeth. Cal tasted blood. Lily crawled away, shaking. Cal fought to his knees, grappling for the man's throat. The thug grinned, pulling a small boot knife. Cal reacted without thinking. He slammed the man's wrist against the rock until the blade dropped, then drove a punch into his jaw hard enough to send him sprawling backward. Straight off the ledge. Another scream. Another thud. Only Hale remained. Cal turned, chest heaving. Hale stood a few yards away, knife gleaming. Blood trickled from his mouth. His eyes held murder. "You killed my kin," Hale growled. "You tried to take something that wasn't yours," Cal replied. "She was mine first." "She was never yours." Hale lunged, swinging the blade. Cal dodged, grabbing Hale's wrist and twisting until bone popped. Hale shrieked but kept fighting, slamming his forehead into Cal's temple. Stars burst behind Cal's eyes. The world wobbled. Hale drove his shoulder into Cal's ribs, knocking him back a step closer to the drop. Lily screamed, reaching blindly toward them. Cal's foot slipped. He barely caught himself on a jutting rock. Hale grinned savagely. "You ain't walking out." He charged again. Cal ducked low, using Hale's momentum against him. He grabbed the front of Hale's coat, spun, and slammed him toward the edge. Hale clawed at Cal's arms, but Cal shoved harder, rage and desperation fusing into one brutal motion. Hale stumbled, arms flailing. Cal didn't hesitate. He drove his boot into Hale's chest. The man toppled backward and disappeared. Silence followed. Heavy. Final. Cal stood there, trembling, breath ragged. Then Lily's hands found him, soft, shaking, searching. Cal, you hurt? He pulled her close. No, I'm here. It's over. She pressed her forehead against his chest, tears soaking into his shirt. I thought you were gone. Not a chance. They stayed like that for a long moment, letting the sun warm their faces, letting the dust settle around their feet. The wind moved gently now, as if relieved. Finally, Lily lifted her head. What happens now? Cal looked out toward the open valley and the distant ribbon of river. The world beyond was uncertain, wild, unpredictable, but it was theirs now. No more chains. No more hunters. Now, he said softly, we find a place where you're safe, where you can breathe, where nobody will ever dare put a price on you again. She smiled, small, fragile, but real. And you? Where do you belong? He brushed her cheek with the back of his hand. Right beside you. They walked together into the sunlight, leaving the canyon of death behind, stepping into whatever life the frontier allowed them. The horizon waited, wide, untamed, promising both hardship and hope. Cal tightened his grip on her hand, and for the first time in a long, brutal stretch of years, he felt like the world might finally let him try again. As they made their slow descent toward the riverbank, Cal felt the weight of the morning settle into his bones, heavy but no longer hollow. The frontier had tested them, but together they endured, stepping forward with a hope neither had known before onward.